welcome. You're watching News9 Live with me, Neha Khanna. And on the eve of the much anticipated G20 summit here in New Delhi, I'm joined by a very special guest, Germany's ambassador to India, Dr. Philipp Ackermann. Ambassador, welcome to News9 Live.
Thank you, Neha. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for making the time. This is, of course, a very busy time for you, Ambassador. But I have to begin by asking you this. You know, India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi has said time and again that India's G20 presidency is the people's presidency. India is the voice of the global south. Based on everything you've seen so far, how do you view India's G20 presidency?
I must say, first and foremost, this was, I think India had brought the G20 presidency to a next level, I would say. Never ever, and that includes Germany as a previous G20 presidency holder, has a G20 presidency be so spread out all across the country. We had, I think, more than 500 meetings everywhere in India, and I remember that I visited eastern Assam, where even there you found signs and clear indications that meetings would be taking place there. And in this context, I would say Prime Minister Modi is right. He brought the G20 to the people of India, and I would even add, it brought India to the world, because all of a sudden cities like Nagpur or Gandhinagar, that were maybe not so much on the map of everybody's world perception, all of a sudden became very popular. And I can tell you only that all the German high officials, ministers who came, senior officials who came to participate in these meetings, they were very impressed by the organizational skills, the hospitality India extended to them, and the way these meetings were organized. So I must say kudos to the Indian presidency, to the protocol, to the ambition, to the Sherpa Amitabh Kant and his team. It's so far an excellent work, I must say. Congratulations.
Heartening to hear that, Ambassador. But there are some tricky issues that we need to address. I know you've said recently that this is probably the toughest year for a G20 presidency, that you don't quite, in that sense, envy your Indian colleagues. Neither the Russian president nor the Chinese president is going to be attending the summit in New Delhi. What do you make of the absence of two such important world leaders from this forum, especially the absence of the Chinese president?
I think the absence of the Chinese president will not spoil this summit. Let me tell you in all honesty. You'll have a very important group of leaders. President Biden will be there, President Macron will be there, Brazilian leaders will be there, South African leaders. So it is unfortunate that the president of China does not attend, but the prime minister will attend. And I think that will not, have any impact on the substance this summit will produce. I would say India has every right to look at this presidency with the greatest self-confidence and pride, actually. So I'm sure that this summit will be the peak of this presidency and will be the success it deserves, basically.
Okay, you say that the absence will not really dent the summit in any way. Some have asked if it does take some of the sheen off, but let me ask you this. There is serious concern over the sharp differences that exist within the grouping on the Russia-Ukraine war. We've seen it at multiple forums in the past. There are some who are even asking, will there even be a New Delhi declaration at the end of it all? In all honesty, Ambassador, is that a concern you share?
I would say that, and you referred to my statement earlier, saying that this is a very, very tough time for a G20 presidency, and I don't envy the Indian colleagues. Other G20 presidencies were easier than that one. But I think India is maybe the country that is the best suited to find a solution to this very difficult situation. So when it comes to the declaration, I know we are in the midst of negotiations. As you know, we, the ambassadors, are not part of these negotiations. But I'm still very confident that the Indian side, with the help of others, will find a solution for the declaration that will, lead to a consented declaration at the end of the day. Let me tell you that we are very interested in this declaration. We want it to be a success. Germany will do the utmost to be the most constructive partner in these negotiations. But having said that, the Ukraine problem is a problem that affects world economy to such a large extent that we are of the opinion that it must be included in the statement at some stage in some way. And we have seen that the Bali Declaration, where India again was very instrumental, I think, in getting it. Bali Declaration is a proof that at some stage there is a possibility to get a consented statement, even under these difficult circumstances. And I'm very confident that India will
even though there was no unanimity on that occasion. But let me ask you this, Ambassador. Yes, this is a very difficult task for India. Fact of the matter is that China and Russia have adopted very intransigent positions on multiple issues at various G20 meetings. China, of course, has chosen to, the president has chosen to skip this event too. Russia has threatened to block the New Delhi declaration if their viewpoint on the Ukraine crisis is not reflected in the declaration. On the other hand, you have the West that insists that there must be a condemnation of Moscow. Therefore, my question to you, Ambassador, is simply this. Just what is the way forward? How do you resolve this stalemate?
But I think the Bali Declaration shows you the way forward. It shows that there is a possibility also in these circumstances to get some declaration, which maybe some of the countries will not entirely subscribe to, but it is a possibility. I don't see, frankly, one country blocking the consensus of the 20 plus others. So I think I'm very confident that with the able diplomatic skills, the Indian delegation and the others who help the Indian delegation will lead to a consented declaration at the end of the day that reflects the Ukraine crisis in the appropriate way. So let me tell you, we have seen Bali. I think we will see Delhi also.
Okay, but if Russia says that any condemnation of its invasion is an absolute deal breaker,
I'm not.
Where does that leave us?
In diplomacy, there are threats, and then there is the reality. So let's wait and see. I'm very calm on this matter, I think.
Okay. Now, of course, India is a country that has friendly ties with Russia. We have a long-standing relationship. India has said since the beginning that it favors a peaceful resolution of the conflict. Prime Minister Modi's words that this is not an era of war have resonated globally, but some have been critical of India's stance, its refusal to condemn Moscow's invasion, for instance. What does Germany feel about India's stance on the Russia-Ukraine war? And as the G20 host, what do you expect from you?
So, let me say the second part of the question is very easy to say. The G20 presidency has to get everybody on board. It's the task of the presidency. So that's a difficult task right now. That's the task of a skilled negotiator. It's less sort of an Indian national task, is more the pen holder's task. Now, with the weight of India as the one of the biggest and most important G20 countries, I think that should be possible. When it comes to India's stance to the Russia crisis, it is certainly not exactly the same than European countries would take. That's true. But we are in constant discussion with the Indian side. And as you rightly say, the Prime Minister has said it's not an era of war, and you said that they want a negotiated peace. I would even say we need a negotiated non-military peace and solution, a just peace and solution, and that's everybody's wish, basically. We don't want a never-ending war. So I think there is a certain overlap when it comes to India and the West when we look at Russia and Ukraine, and I think we have all interest to end this war as quickly as possible, this war of aggression the Russians imposed on Ukraine. But it must be a solution that is just and fair and takes into consideration the country that has been invaded.
I see your point, Ambassador, but at the moment it doesn't look like either side is willing to really go to the negotiating table. They're both digging their side's heel. I'm talking about Russia and Ukraine. But do you believe that New Delhi could in fact use the G20 summit as an effective platform to play peace broker? Do you see that as a possibility at all during this event?
I think that the G20 summit as such a sort of, it's a peak event. It's the high point of the Indian presidency. It's a very public event. I don't think that the G20 summit will be a peace forum for Ukraine. But what I do think is that India can play a very important role. But as you rightly say, we are not at the stage where people come voluntarily at a table. So this role in diplomacy has to be played very confidentially, discreetly, in a way secretly. I don't think that G20 summit is the sort of forum or the platform to develop these ideas, but I do think that India can play an important.
A fact is it started as an economic forum, but geopolitics have hijacked the G20 summit. So let me ask you again, how optimistic are you, Ambassador, that there will be a positive and constructive outcome at the end of the summit and that we will in fact have a New Delhi declaration with all member states on board?
So let me start by saying that, what we all have learned over the last years is that geoeconomics and geopolitics are densely interwoven. You can't separate one from the other. Political steps lead to economic consequences. And what we see in Ukraine now, the shortage of fertilizer, the grain crisis we have in many African countries and in other countries too. I mean, India also is a victim of this war when it comes to fertilizer deliveries. So basically, I'm not one who says you can compartmentalize, you can say economics here, politics here. You have to see it in one basket. And that's the difficulty of this presidency. And let me say again, I think everybody now is sitting around the table and tries to find a common language. And you have in Germany and its European partners truly constructive partners in this negotiation process. We are really interested to get a statement on Sunday, and I think the chances are high.
Well, let's certainly hope that this does come true, Ambassador. But if I may ask you a slightly different question. Correct me if I'm wrong, but China is Germany's largest trading partner. But given the geopolitical shifts we've seen in recent times, how do you view the challenge posed by what is described by the rest of the world as China's growing aggression, hegemony, and expansionism?
You are right when you say that China is, in our business sort of setup, extremely important. But you have also, or you might have heard that the German government has issued a China strategy where, this problem which you were referring to is clearly addressed. What the German business now is doing, and India is very high on its agenda, is diversifying, not to put all eggs in one basket. So what we see is a renewed interest in India by the German business world and business community, because I think what we have learned the hard way through the Ukraine crisis when it comes to our dependency of Russian energy is that it is not good to hedge and to put everything in one basket. We need to have more diversity. And what other country comes to mind than India when we compare it to China?
It's interesting you say that, because Prime Minister Modi very recently said that countries need to look for more resilient and inclusive supply chains. Now, that comes at a time when other countries are increasingly wary of their dependence on China as the factory of the world. Does Germany see India as a reliable and safe investment destination?
Absolutely, absolutely. The answer is a clear yes. I think there are impediments, there are obstacles on the way, always. I mean, that's true for every country in the world, but when we see how German business, how German economy is evolving in India and with the Indian partners, it's quite heartening to see, how strong the relations are and how positive the approach from the German side is towards India. And I have to add, that is true in the other way too. So we have a very, very substantive Indian investment in Germany. Indian private sector is very strong, and we see a renewed interest in investing in Germany, and that's also very, very positive.
Last couple of questions, Ambassador. There are countries like the United States that today see India as an effective countervailing force against China, especially vis-a-vis hegemony. How does Germany view India's role vis-a-vis China?
We see China as the country which I described before, which is very important in economic terms. So there are, areas where China is a partner, but there are areas where China is a competitor. And there are also areas where China is a rival. So China is very, very differentiated. Our view to China is very differentiated. Our view to India is less differentiated. India is a democracy. It's a very resilient and stable country, a country that has undergone a development like no other in the last 20 years, I would say. So I think that our investment in India, our political shift and economic shift towards India reflects that view of ours that India is a very, very important partner in the region. And when you look at the whole Indo-Pacific, you have to say that it is in our interest to have India as a strong partner here.
Last question, Ambassador, I promise you. Germany is India's biggest trading partner in the European Union. Indian students make up the highest number of foreign students in Germany, over 42,000. You've said Germany does see India as a very attractive market because of its robust and sustained economic growth at a time when the rest of the world is witnessing an economic slump. Having said that, would it not be correct to say, Ambassador, that for certain reasons, New Delhi-Berlin ties seem to have lagged behind, let's say, New Delhi-Paris ties, for instance? Why do you think that is the case? And going forward, are we going to see a greater effort on part of Germany to further cement this relationship, maybe invest more in India?
So let me start by saying that I'm very happy that France and India have such a good relations. You know, France is our closest partner worldwide.
It's not a zero-sum game. No, it's not.
And if France is doing well with India, that means also Germany is doing well with India. But I think that what you've seen over the last 12 months is with the new German government, not so new anymore, the German government, is such a clear commitment to the Indian-German relations that you will be surprised to see that half of the German cabinet were in India right now. Now, G20 helped certainly, but most of the ministers took their time to reach out bilaterally also to their Indian counterparts. We have in the last couple of months, I have been hosting every minister, almost every minister of the German cabinet. That's a great development, and I'm very happy that on this highest level of relationship we have this good dynamics, the momentum that is here. But you should not forget, it is very visible when the Chancellor comes here. It's extremely media prone when people come here and do press conferences. But there is a sort of a structural relationship that goes way, way back. And that is so deep and so intense that I would say India-German relations have always been very, very good. I'm referring to academic cooperation. You were referring to the students. I mean, this is amazing to see how many students are coming to Germany. Cultural relations, are so old and so established that I would say India and Germany are really strategic partners on every level, and you'll see more of Germany in India, hopefully more of India in Germany too. And I'd say that with all the geopolitical difficulties, our countries are getting closer to each other.
Certainly good to hear that. On that note, Ambassador, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for making time for us. And here's looking forward to a successful G20 summit.
We wish the same.
Thank you, Ambassador.